Welcome back to the Stimulating Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Rich Vogel, and today I am joined by a man who has really emerged as a leader in neuromonitoring over the past several years, David Zimmerman. David, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Thank you very much, Rich. It's my pleasure to be on here.
Yeah,
Long-time listener, first-time caller, I think we'll say.
So you're the one. You're my one listener. That's awesome.
I'm boosting your numbers. I was listening to your recent episode on the drive-in today. So yeah, you
that's
put out
awesome.
a good product. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. I like that feedback. I always take the good, the bad, and the negative. The positive is reassuring, and the negative helps to point me in the right direction. So I like that. You know what else I really love? I was thinking about this. So what I love about having guests on the show, which I haven't done enough, is that you and I have known each other for a few years. And since day one, I really thought about you that you are a really nice guy, like a really genuinely good person. And I consider you a friend, which is odd because I was thinking about it and I was like, I don't actually know you all that well. And this is an opportunity to change that. So why don't we just start there and tell me a few things about yourself? Like, where are you from? What's your favorite flavor of water ice? And how'd you get into neuromonitoring?
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm a Northeast kid, through and through. Born in Connecticut originally. Now I live in New York City. So I've really always been, a Northeast person. I went to school in Boston. So as far as my exposure to the rest of the country, I've traveled around, but I've never really worked in any of the other markets, the neuromonitoring markets. So mostly, Northeast New York City. I didn't always know that I was going to be, destined for neuromonitoring. I think perhaps things are changing now with some of the fantastic schools and programs that are training college students into this field. I had to find my way in through my own circuitous path. So I was a neuroscience major. I went to school for neuroscience. I love neuroscience, but, I had no idea that neuromonitoring was a thing. This is back, in the early 2000s. Graduated in 2007. So for those of you doing your math, I am 40 years old. And I learned about neuromonitoring in 2010. So there was a period where I was, out of school. I was working. I was, trying to figure out what else could I do with neuroscience. I knew I loved neuroscience, and I didn't end up going the medical school route. I was thinking about do I go into research, and I was working as a research technician as a job, my after school job, and this
like
was
in a lab.
In a lab, yeah. So this was in a pathology department of a very well-respected lab. And I was doing transgenic mice research. More importantly, I was the lab tech. Like, I was collecting the genetic information, putting everything through PCRs and creating the cohorts and the database for the postdocs and all the researchers in the lab to use their animals within their studies. And I learned very quickly this was not for me. I did not want to be in a basement with pipettes and the smell of mouse alfalfa all day, every day. I wanted to be working with people. I wanted to be out and about. And so I transitioned.
Truth. I love that. I felt the same way.
It's for some people. Some people are destined for laboratory research.
Absolutely.
And if you're one of those people, bless you, do it. For me, I learned it wasn't what made me happy. I learned to love podcasts. I learned to love audiobooks. I learned to invest in good headphones. But I also learned maybe research isn't my path. So I thought, what else could I do? I ended up looking at physical therapy because I wanted to be active. I wanted to work with humans. I wanted to work with people that I could interact with. And I ended up working in a physical therapy office that coincidentally was one level below a neuromonitoring company. So just by chance, at lunchtime, we got to talking, and I found out that this field even exists. And it seemed like I had some essential prerequisites that made me a good fit for it. So in addition to my training, my education in neuroscience, I'm going to back up even further into my high school days where, as a kid, as an extracurricular job, like I was one of those techie kids. I was working with a group of friends who had their own like DJ equipment, and we would do all the dances, the school dances, middle school, high school dances, any band performances, anything that, a young kid needed equipment for. We provided that hardware. So we're talking about microphones, speakers, cables, a mixing board, CD players back then, and setting everything up, moving into a space, putting everything in, plugging all these things in, running the event, troubleshooting if anything goes down, if we lose a light or we lose an audio channel or something starts crackling, we start getting feedback on a microphone, figuring out where the problem is, how to fix the problem, and do it quickly so that the audience doesn't know any better, or at least realizes that we've solved the problem. So many of you out there may have started to realize that some of these skills are directly transferable into the operating room. The only thing that's different is, I'm not looking at a group of kids or parents in an audience. It's now a neurosurgeon with a patient on the table staring at me, waiting for me to figure out, is it technical? Is it real? What's going on? So I kind of arrived with all those skills. I had no idea that I would use them after school. This was just what I used to earn extra money and pay for food on the weekend and help pay for rent. But surprise, surprise, it was like excellent training for the operating room. So that's how I found neuromonitoring. It was a combination of neuroscience and this strange, technical troubleshooting skill that I found is actually, pretty difficult to teach. So I felt very fortunate to find neuromonitoring when I did.
That's such an interesting story, and you're not the first person that I've met that had a sort of that similar, what you call a, techie background, but also sort of this mix of what you might call audio engineering
Yeah.
and then moving into neural monitoring and finding a lot of similarities there. And then your neuroscience background obviously prepared you really well. I want to fast forward a little bit. So you just mentioned teaching, and I know obviously you spent a fair amount of time in the operating room. You learned a lot. You became very good at what you did. And then at some point you moved in from practicing to teaching. Tell me about that experience of just transitioning from being somebody who is performing the neural monitoring to somebody who is essentially teaching like the next group or the next generation, and what that was like.
Well, there's two ways that I really do that. There's the in-person training and learning, which I always do like a lead by example. Do what I do, follow what I do. I'll explain to you what I'm doing, but watch what I'm doing, take notes, look at the order that I'm doing things in, because there is a logic behind it. But around 2015, I got involved with Labouré College of Healthcare, and they were just starting to create their online intraoperative neuromonitoring program. And this happened by luck. Again, like if you want to summarize how I got into all this stuff, luck is the headline, and then a little bit of being prepared for that moment as like the subtitle. But I was going to EEG boot camp, one of Asset's EEG boot camps, because I thought, I'm already doing neuromonitoring. I've already got my CNM. What else can I do? And I realized while I'm sitting and listening to these EEG lectures that it's not necessarily a transferable skill, right? I can't take the EEG that I do in the operating room and then use that as a prerequisite to become eligible to take the REEG certification exam. So I said, all right, well, I'm not going to quit my job. I'm not going to stop working in the operating room just so I can get another set of initials at the end of my name. I got up and I walked out to the vendor area, and I met the lovely people who were setting up the Labouré table. And we just started talking, and they said, we're looking for instructors. And I said, I'm looking to be an instructor. I've always liked teaching. I've always loved training. How can I get involved? How can I help? And so that kind of started me on the path of creating online education or on-demand education. And I found that really to be successful in this field. We work with a very strange schedule. The operating room is not forgiving. It's not the kind of thing you can always predict. Maybe you know what time you're going to start, but you don't always know what time you're going to finish. And if you're going to do learning on top of that, it needs to be on demand. It needs to be at your convenience. And in my opinion, it needs to be in small chunks. So I don't think it's always reasonable to expect someone at the end of a long, stressful day in the operating room to sit down for an hour or 2 hour didactic lecture on some dense material. I would rather it be in small chunks, 20 to 40 minutes, 1 hour max of, one subject at a time, one chapter at a time. And so I built out my program with that in mind. My SSEP lecture is in 5 parts. So SSEP is part 1 all the way to 5. And this way, someone can start and finish a lesson within one session, without life getting in the way. Have families, they've got life outside of the operating room, dogs, kids, things that require attention, and professional development, continuing education is obviously important. But I think we all know, sometimes that gets put on the back burner when you have all these other life stresses. So what I've tried to do is create small chunks, bite-size, on-demand lessons that our people can consume, as conveniently as possible.
There's a lot of your story that really resonates with me, and there's one piece that really sticks out that I think may be beneficial to the audience. And I think people like you and I who have found various levels of success or advancement in our careers, we can kind of point to one point in time or some specific action that was taken that really was the jumping off point. And for me, it was going to an ASNM meeting, very similar to you in your story about Laboret. So for me, I went to an ASNM meeting and I'm looking at people who are giving talks, and I'm very passionate about education. And so I went up to somebody and said, how do I get up there? Right. And that was really the point for me where things started to change. And it was really about getting out of my comfort zone and going and asking somebody. Now, you had this experience where you had this background of presumably this passion for education. They were looking for somebody at Laboret, and you're looking to do education. Was that the point for you that was really kind of a springboard point in time?
I mean, it was definitely a turning point, but I would probably look a few years earlier when I was, I was training. I was finally signed off. I was getting into the operating room and starting to do cases on my own. And there's another group of trainees, students behind me. And I started taking my lessons and giving it to them. That's when I started creating my own presentations, my own PowerPoint presentations where I'm trying to make sense of what I do in the operating room, or what I think I understand about how it works. Because, at this point, I didn't have my CNM. I'm trying to understand, how the differential amplifier works. I'm trying to understand how stimulation works. And I've always found that when you create a lesson and you try to teach someone else, it forces you to know what you're talking about. It forces you to go over your thoughts, go over your mind and your process, and back it up. It's not just your opinion that you should be presenting. Although that's important, it should also be based in fact. It should be based in logic, and it should work. So I would go all the way back to when I first started neuromonitoring, and I was asked, or I was given permission to give these presentations. I was never asked, right? I was always proactive. I always said, hey, I want to try to explain this. They're asking me for advice on how this works. Can I have a sit down with people and just give them my thoughts in one session? So I would go all the way back to the beginning, and I think it's probably my personality. I'm a little proactive, probably an annoying trait for some people that were my supervisors in the beginning, but I think it served me well over time. And the desire to help and teach and to explain has really been my driving force, because it helps me understand, right? It helps me know what I'm doing and feel good about what I'm doing and trust that I'm doing things the right way.
Yeah, 2 points in there. One is, and I think this is fantastic advice for anybody who's looking to advance. It's very rare that somebody's going to give you something.
Hmm.
You have to ask for it, and to ask
Yeah.
for it, you have to demonstrate that you know commitment in advance. But it's very rare for somebody to just come up to you and say, "Hey, I want to give you an opportunity." You
Yeah.
usually have to fight for it or ask for it. And I think that's really important. The second point is, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but it's true for me. I've always found, just like it sounds like you have, that the best way to learn something is to teach it. You master it to a point almost through an exercise of developing an education, whether it's a presentation or something on a topic, and through that development process, you learn so much, you actually gain a certain level of experience and expertise in it. And that's, I think, really fantastic too. I want to transition a little bit to your experience in working with I don't want to say the next generation per se, but the people who are entering the field and what you've seen over time. So one question that comes to mind is, what do you think, for people entering the field, what do you think are the most critical skills or mindsets that really position somebody well to find success in neuromonitoring?
Hmm. Um, a lot of things come to mind. I mean, one, you've got to know your science. You've got to know the anatomy. You've got to understand the terms, the terminology that you're using, what it means, the advanced concepts. We're not doing simple work. We're doing surgeries on real humans. So it's high stress, high level of responsibility. I always tell people, we're not making sandwiches. We're not making cups of coffee for people. Like, there's real risk in what we do. So take it seriously and hold yourself to a higher standard. But that's a given. Like, I always held myself to a high standard because I thought that was expected. Like, I thought you should know the right way to do things. You should be right when you're communicating. You should, when you communicate, the way you communicate is so very important. You have to speak clearly and confidently because that's what is needed by the surgeon in our situation to listen to you. Like, it's not enough for you to speak. You also have to be heard, which means you've got to cut through the noise. So if you're wishy-washy and the tone of your voice is quiet or not confident, the way that is received is you are not competent. So why should they listen to you? Why should they listen to the fact that you're calling out a change when they don't believe that you believe what you're saying? So I would say be aware of how you communicate your information in the operating room. And in order for you to feel confident about that, you've got to cover all your bases. You got to know your stuff. You've got to do a whole bunch of work before you speak up to make sure it's not technical, that it's real. We have a whole troubleshooting scenario. We put people through their paces and we say, this is how you set up, this is how you ensure that it's not a technical problem, because if you speak up and you're wrong, you can lose credibility and the surgeon might not listen to you the next time. So you've got to keep that in mind. But at the same time, I would also say you still have to speak up. And sometimes you don't have an infinite amount of time. And it is okay to be wrong. It's not like you say something and then all of a sudden the world springs into action. There are other people on the other side who are listening to what you're saying and analyzing it and evaluating it. And the surgeon is trying to decide if what you're saying makes sense for the situation. And if it does, do they do anything? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes, okay, I have to accept this risk and I have to continue with the surgery. And your job is to communicate the status of what you're seeing and to verify that the status is real. So I would say communicate efficiently and effectively, and don't be afraid of being wrong, because in our world, this is the approach I always took, is if I'm wrong, I want to know about it as soon as possible. It's not about me. It's not about my ego. If I'm wrong about something in the patient or about anything, the faster I figure out that I am wrong, that my left hand is plugged into my right foot, for example, or some other version of a simple human error, The faster I figure that out, the faster I can fix that. And that's good news. That's good news for the patient. That's good news for me and for everybody involved. So I always took bad news as good news for me. Like if I'm wrong, tell me now, let me fix it, and let's get through it faster. So don't be precious about your ego. Don't be afraid to be wrong. If you are wrong, accept it, figure out why, and fix it. And when you do that without pushing back from an ego perspective, everybody recognizes that. Everybody sees that you're trying to do the right thing, and ultimately that's what builds into good practice and good service, because people are not always right, and you shouldn't expect that you're always going to be right. I've had many situations where I'm helping to troubleshoot people, their setup, and they're saying, "Oh, there's no way I did anything wrong. My setup is perfect. I do it this way every single time. Every single time I do it this way, and couldn't be that I'm wrong." And, we go through our steps and we find out, oh, you did actually plug things in backwards. You put something into 14 and 15 instead of 12 and 13, or, something simple. So it takes time to discover those things, right? It takes time to go through and figure out that a mistake was made. So having no ego in that room and then communicating clearly, that's what I would say is the skills that you should try to develop in yourself. And obviously, all the education too.
Yeah, and it sounds like just having those skills are important, obviously, but from a teaching perspective, it sounds like you do a really good job at balancing sort of teaching the technical side of neuromonitoring with what I guess I would call the real world complexities of the OR, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got challenges with surgeons. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't really have neurologists online. So a lot of people were doing this on their own. They were interpreting their own information. And now you have multiple people, a neuromonitorist, a neurologist that are looking at the data. They may or may not disagree. There's a lot of challenges in there that are, not even on the surface. They're just not easy to navigate. And I think that's really important that, that there's important skills to come in with, but these things also can be trained over time. With respect to a training program in general, what do you think makes a training program truly effective? Are there any specific methods or tools that you found especially valuable in your approach?
Yeah, I think what we do works pretty well. So we have kind of a parallel training path. We have our students, our trainees, taking lessons, online in the classroom with me in the beginning, but primarily at home during their own time online. And then as soon as possible, we get them into the operating room with a supervisor, a preceptor, a mentor, a trainer, whatever your company calls them. You're there supervised, and you're learning the physical nature of the job, how to handle the electrodes, how to plug in your equipment, what it feels like to plug it in properly versus improperly, how to manage your cables, how, all the things that you have to keep track of in order to plug things in correctly on the computer side, on the hardware side, and then also on the patient. So I do those in parallel. And there is a sequence of lessons that I give them, starting, with the very basic fundamentals of anatomy and neuroscience, and building all the way up through the more complex issues of, stimulation parameters, mapping techniques for brain and spinal cord. There's a lot of room in between, but at the same point, we have to make sure they're capable of handling the more simple surgeries, because you're not gonna come out of a training program and start doing awake craniotomy, language mapping. You're probably going to be doing lumbar and cervical spine procedures. By volume, that's our biggest caseload, and those are the simplest. I put simple in quotes because it shouldn't be simple, but we all know some of these procedures are less stressful on us than others. So doing both of those at the same time, and we evaluate our people along the way. So I've got a very long list of competencies that we expect everyone to be able to do on every single surgery, every single time. And we're We're expecting the trainees to learn this very long list of things. It's like 115 items now. We keep changing it and adding to it. So this is given to them on day one. We say, this is what is expected of you. And this is what your trainers are going to be using to evaluate your performance. So we measure them all along the way, and we end up getting this data and visualizing a trend line, and we're seeing them move up and to the right, as expected. So at certain time points, we expect them to be able to do certain things. And I think this timeline is very reasonable. It's very doable. People have done it. And if for whatever reason you're not, if there's a certain subject that you're not getting, we want to discover it and we want to then work on it. So, this goes back to my philosophy of not being afraid to be wrong. As an educator, I prefer when I see wrong answers because it tells me this is something we need to work on. This is a weakness that we now need to turn into a strength. So it gives me like a targeted approach, something specific to work with the learner on to help make them get it. Like maybe it was, something simple that wasn't causing it to click, or maybe it was a giant concept that they just weren't paying attention to when they were watching the lesson. So discovering the weakness, I think, is the secret. Not being afraid to be wrong so that you can discover that you're wrong so that you can then become right the correct way. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of teaching of vulnerability in there, I think, and that goes a long way,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in building trust. One of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on the show is because you are known to be a really good educator, and your company is known to have a good program. I don't like to name names of companies on the show generally, but people, I'd love to have Julie Trott on at some point. She's same thing, well
Mm-hmm.
known, widely regarded for education. Hey, I would ask her the same question that I'm going to ask you, which is that, obviously you have this great education program. And from where I sit and have sat over the years, I know that there's a wide variation in training quality across the country, from the best programs to people that don't get training at all except how to push some buttons. I call it Jimmy John's neuromonitoring because I once met somebody who was working in Jimmy John's like last week, and now they're doing neuromonitoring. I view it as a problem, and I view it as a problem for our field, for our reputation, but primarily for patient care. And I view it as a problem that needs to be fixed. But what are your thoughts? Do you think this can ever be fixed? And if so, any thoughts on how that might evolve?
Good question. I can say confidently that I believe there is agreement amongst all the educators. I've spoken with all of them. I know them. I know Julie, Christina Young, Aaron Beverwick, Payam Andalib, myself, Brooke Callahan, like all these people who are at these large places that are in positions of education. And I know I'm, leaving many people out. We've all talked about what good neuromonitoring is. What is the standard? What should we be doing? And we all agree. So it's not about what is good neuromonitoring from the education perspective, from an educator's perspective, excuse me. It's about how do we deliver it? How do we get our trainees and our learners access to that information? And that's where I think you see the difference in teaching styles. I know the way James Watt does it. It's different than the way I do it. He's fantastic. I think I'm pretty good. Will we ever standardize the way these larger companies structure their business in order to make their people available to consume education? Probably not. I like the way we do it. I'm a fan of the on-demand method. Our program at the Hippocampus, you can see I've got my shirt right here. It's all on demand. You can access it from your computer, from your phone, from a tablet. As long as you have internet access, you have access to our program. The question is, are you going to go through it? Are you going to put in the work and watch the video lessons and take and pass the quizzes? And if you do that and you get the answers correct and you obtain all these competencies and you demonstrate your ability to have these competencies, then I think that translates at least into the knowledge that is needed to then succeed in the operating room. That's one half of the equation, right? That's the learning, that's the getting the information. I really believe that long days in the operating room make for poor classroom attendance. Right? You're just not gonna get someone who's just got out of a 14-hour scoliosis correction or craniotomy and then expect them to spend another 2 hours falling asleep to your anesthesia lecture. It's not gonna work. If you make them do that, they're not gonna retain that information. So my approach has been the bite-size, piecemeal, on-demand approach, which is then combined with the in-person, on-site training. And I make sure that all of our trainers know what's expected of this person as they progress through the pathway. I don't know that I'm going to convince other people to do it the same way. I don't know that I need to. I think there's also, the unspoken element of the individual having, the right stuff for this field. It's not a role that everyone should be doing. We want to find the people who are good at it. We want to make them welcome. We want to give them all the resources and the access to everything that they need to succeed. But at the same time, you can't have people fainting in the operating room or unable to communicate in stressful situations doing this job. So discovering that you are that person or you're not that person is also a part of it. And I think we probably get into trouble when we force someone to do a job that maybe they're not suited for. That's when you can run into problems, both I think as a business and also as a patient care provider.
Do you think that education and variability in education in general is one of the or the most significant challenge facing the clinical side of neuromonitoring today, or would you point to something else?
I don't know that education is the biggest barrier. I mean, I know people who have started as a trainee with no experience who have done fantastic, and then other people who came to us with a lot of experience and we still had to put them through our training process because we found we had to retrain them. I think, there's always going to be that element of the individual, someone who's got, the it. They're just right for this job. They're able to handle the stress. They're able to communicate. They're able to think about the science and deal with the computer side of all this too. Like, we're a very technology heavy field. You have to be able to interact with computers and type quickly and click on buttons in the right place in order to get all this stuff to work. I honestly, I don't know that I have an answer to that question. I think it's hard to find those people. And when you find those people, you want to keep them. You want to make them grow. You want to make them feel like they have opportunity and that they're doing valuable work. And then I think the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah, that last piece that you said, well, two pieces, having opportunity and that they're doing valuable work. Yeah, I said in my last episode that 52% of people leave their jobs due to lack of opportunity.
Right.
And I think there's a piece in there where there's a lack of fulfillment too. And
Mhm.
seeing that there is opportunity and that this can be a fulfilling field, I think is an important solution to some of the challenges that we're facing with respect to people leaving their jobs or leaving their fields. It's really something that needs to be focused on.
The
Um,
human, the human who's doing the job.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to transition to May of this year at the IONM annual meeting.
Hmm.
You and Dr. Oishi, is that how you say his name? From Mayo
Yeah. Tatsuya
Rochester?
Oishi. Yeah. He's
Right.
fantastic too. I should have mentioned him at the top. He's a fantastic educator also. Yeah.
Absolutely. But the two of you gave a presentation, and I wasn't able to be there. I was doing exams in another area, but I
Hmm.
asked you for the video, and I was really blown away by what you guys did with this education session. I mean, really, really good. And, not to knock other education sessions or even other societies, but this was really one of the best that I've seen.
Oh,
So
thank you.
for the audience that might not be aware of it, can you share a little bit about what you did and what your experience there was?
Yeah, so we tried to incorporate augmented reality into teaching and visualizing the SSEP pathway. What we did, and maybe we can splice the video footage of us doing this over me talking here. We created animations, and we had this idea of you want to walk through the nervous system. If anyone has ever like put on VR goggles or augmented reality glasses, you'll know it's a very visceral experience. The technology has really gotten to a good place, and being able to walk around hands free and see a virtual environment is a very cool experience, but it's also what I think is one of the best ways to teach anatomy. I remember having to learn about the vasculature, the circle of Willis, on a two-dimensional paper, and it just didn't make any sense to me until I finally pulled up a 3D model. I saw, oh, the ACA, it curves back, and that's why this anterior thing takes care of my posterior tibial nerve. Ah, I get it now. That was the idea. We wanted to take augmented reality, and we wanted to have an experience where people got up and they walked around, because, you know, I always try to do this at the end of the programs that I put together. The final session, the one that's towards the end, I don't want people in their seat for another hour falling asleep. I want people to stand up and interact with something or someone that they don't always get to work with. And I've always found that to be successful. For this program, I'm showing Dr. Oishi my ideas, and he's showing me the 3D animations that he made on, the dorsal column SSEP pathway. And I'm like, let's put this together. So we realized that everyone should experience this, but there is a barrier to entry for virtual reality and augmented reality. Not everyone can purchase these expensive headsets and lug them around, but everyone has a phone. Everyone has a smartphone, and these cameras are capable of being an augmented reality device. So we programmed an experience where, you scan a QR code and you pull up the somatosensory system, and we had some very basic interactions, and you basically follow the action potential. You start at the posterior tibial nerve at the ankle. You walk your phone into an orb, you trigger an animation, and then, you follow it up the leg and then into the spinal cord and all the way up to the brain. And at the same time that these next waypoints are appearing, we're also showing the waveforms. You have to physically move your body and look over there, because there's a digital poster over to your right, and over to your left are these information cards about the dipole and the generators and the obligate peaks and the recording montages that we'll use for all of these obligate peaks for SSEPs. So this was an experience that people had to walk around for. They didn't just sit in their seat and watch a video. They had to stand up. They had to navigate a space. They had to not bump into their colleagues. And I told people at the beginning, we're not playing bumper cars. Please be considerate of your fellow colleagues. And everyone was. I think everyone got it very quickly. And, there's a little bit of a learning curve of walking around a space using your phone as your eyes, but people got it and certainly enjoyed it. So that's what we tried to do. We had large ambitions of all the different evoked potentials and pathways, and we very quickly realized how complicated it was going to be to just do one of them. So we had to streamline our ideas and just focus on SSEPs. Perhaps our next one will do something a little bit more involved. But, that was a big undertaking. It was a lot of programming. It was a lot of trial and error. We discovered iPhones and Androids behave differently in virtual environments. That was fun. That was something we had no control over. But again, everyone who was in the room, I think, appreciated it. And yeah, we had a blast putting it together. And then, you do all this work, then you get to sit back and watch a room full of people, walking around, staring at something through their phone and, trying to push their phone into a invisible sphere that you can't see, but they're experiencing with. So it was very rewarding to watch it all come together.
I love that. What was most, I think, surprising to me about it A lot of people probably wouldn't know this, but I saw a preliminary version that you
Hmm.
two showed me in February at ACNS, and 3 months later, the progress that was made on it was just extraordinary. And what I
Yeah.
love is that you're not reading, as you said, about the nervous system, you're interacting with it. And that's a totally
Yeah.
different way of learning. I love this idea of AR and VR really becoming central components of education,
Oh,
not
yeah.
just in neurodiagnostics, but beyond, but certainly in neurodiagnostics. I just think there's so much runway there. And it's exciting to
Hmm.
see what you've done with this back in
Thank you.
May.
Yeah, I think that's the future. I mean, it's so when you get to experience it, it's so very obviously a better way to learn. There's just a cost barrier to entry, which is why
Sure.
we love the idea of doing it through the phone. But I don't, if I were to do it all over again, I think we would probably choose a different program. But hindsight's 2020. So what are you going to do?
Well, innovation has to start somewhere, and you
Yeah.
learn from it, and you iterate and make it better over time. One thing that you mentioned too, I think this is going to be my last question. We're going to have to wind down soon, but one thing that you mentioned about that experience was people kind of getting up out of their seats, and there was some level of interaction, engagement, and I think about just society membership and meeting participation or
Hmm.
attendance in general. And there's this saying that your network is your net worth, meaning that one of your most powerful unlocks in your career is building a network. And the best way to build that is going to these society meetings and actually engaging with people and learning about different ways of doing things, et cetera, et cetera. And you've been very active in the ASNM over the past few years, and not to detract from other societies or anything, but this
Hmm.
is just, my experience with you. Talk to me about your experience in networking at society meetings, how it's been beneficial to you, and why others should really make that a central or important part of their career.
Yeah, this is a very very good question. I can confidently say that every significant career development that I've had has been a result of getting outside my bubble and interacting with other people who are also doing my job. Maybe they're not working for the same company as me. I'm not interacting with them every day, but we're colleagues, we're peers, and learning what other people do, how they do it is so very valuable. And I've also, aside from it being, a venue for someone who wants to get involved with something meaningful that has structure and organization and fantastic people, there's also a component of, meeting your heroes, right? Like meeting the people who write the papers and the textbooks that you have been studying and maybe putting on a pedestal this whole time. And then I get to go to a meeting and I meet Dr. Rich Vogel, and you're just like a guy that I can talk to. I remember the first time we met, and I was probably nervous to go up to you and start a conversation, but I found you couldn't have been friendlier and welcoming. And everyone has been like that. Everyone that I've ever gone up to and had a conversation with at any of these society meetings is just enthusiastic that someone else is here who also enjoys this very niche corner of healthcare that we have. And it's just been so rewarding to get out of your bubble, experience new things, experience new cities, and meet new people who are doing the same job that you're doing, but maybe in a slightly different way, who you can then learn from and then collaborate with. It has been everything for me. It's been at every point along my development the thing that has pushed me to the next level. Not staying put and expecting change to come to me, but me going and talking to somebody else or going after an opportunity has been what has allowed me to go from where I was to where I am right now.
100%. The same is true for me. And a lot of people I know too. I really think that that is the most important component, the unlock that really advances your career is being
Yeah.
outside of that comfort zone, meeting people, learning from other people, and just creating a network of friends and mentors or mentees. So important. Cannot overemphasize that.
Yeah. So have a presentation, right? Like, don't wait for someone to ask you to create a lesson. Create a PowerPoint presentation that explains something that you think you understand. It forces you to understand it better. Go up to somebody at one of these meetings who's more than willing to talk to you and say, "Hey, I have got this idea. Is there any way I can, give this talk?" And then you find yourself on the stage talking with people and collaborating with people. And then you find yourself being asked to volunteer and get involved with things. And then you start planning these events. And I find myself in the position of now talking to people who are coming to these things for the first time. And I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be happier to, not pull the ladder up behind me, but to make sure people are given opportunities and feel welcome, because, there's not that many of us.
David, that's one of the reasons why I said in the very beginning that I knew you to be a genuinely good person, somebody I really like. It's been wonderful having you on the show today. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. You can submit your questions and comments to the Rich Vogel subreddit or send me an email to stimulatingstuffpodcast@gmail.com. I always love hearing from you. I'm Rich Vogel, and that was Stimulating Stuff.